Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of Squaretalk. My name is Philip, I'm your host as well as a brand and content manager at Squareshot. Today I spoke with Brian Guidry, who is the Chief Growth Officer at Pixelz, a platform that empowers photo studio professionals with reliable retouching at scale. Retouching is the unsung hero of content production. That's why we really dug into all things related. Brian and I talked about what it takes to scale a business, flow of retouching, the benefits of having agile processes, talent upscaling, and so much more. This episode will be insightful for studio owners, photographers, and e-commerce brands looking to outsource the post-production processes. Without further ado, let's get to the episode. Brian, welcome to Squaretalk. I'm really happy to have you, and thanks for making the time in your busy schedule. I know that December and November usually is a very action-packed, time of the year. So thanks for coming on. How are you doing?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
And we had a short conversation a few weeks ago, but it made me really excited, about the topics that we're going to explore today. And I feel like they're paramount to business regardless of whether you're producing content or utilizing the content to sort of, sell your goods. And so, but before we go into that, could you please introduce yourself a little bit? And for those who are unfamiliar, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Pixelz itself, the company.
Sure. Yeah. So Brian Guidry, been working in the retail industry for about 20 years now. Started working at a bunch of US-based retailers, both big and small, and then jumped over to Europe and was working for the fast fashion brand Mango for almost 8 years and was running global sourcing for them. And then the second part of my career, I jumped over to the dark side on the fashion tech side of things, where I've been a partner and worn a number of hats at Pixelz.com, where I am today.
And so what role does Pixelz play in the e-commerce / content producing industry?
We are in the e-commerce enablement bucket. So we are a service behind the scenes, but really play a core role to a lot of high growth e-com and established e-commerce brands, and helping them really create content, product content at scale, really to try to get professional quality product images online to help them sell more. That's really the bread and butter of Pixelz.com these days.
And scale is something that we're going to talk a lot about.
Yeah.
But before we go into that, could you please sort of describe how does you're a chief growth officer right now. I want to also put it out there at Pixelz. How does your day look like?
Yeah. Like I said before, I've worn a lot of different hats at the company, but predominantly I'm focused on the commercial side of our business right now. Really working with our sales team, with business development partnerships, really just looking for ways that we can help our customers thrive. I think, as you guys know as well, in operating studios, ton of uncertainty, ton of bottlenecks, the scaling piece, and really everyone's looking to try to get product online faster. So yeah, really, having a lot of conversations with customers these days and trying to problem solve and really help set up, scalable content production solutions for them.
Mm-hmm. But do you remember when you joined the company? At what state was it back then?
Well, it was a very different company. I joined. I'm not one of the original founders, but I joined quite early on. I think within the first year of our existence. And so, at that point, we were back in early 2012. We were really focused on marketplace imagery. So, creating product images for Amazon and eBay and Rakuten, and we had an API, and so we were integrating our image editing and retouching service into a lot of the e-com platforms, BigCommerce and Shopify, things like that. Fast forward, we just had our 10-year anniversary last January, and really we're a one-stop shop for everything really on a PDP page when it comes to product content. Really, again, working with a lot of e-commerce leaders these days and helping them again, to edit and retouch product content at scale.
And what were some of the major changes that occurred between you starting at the company, right, and now, 10-year anniversary?
Yeah, many changes, to be honest. I think we've lived the startup roller coaster. It's been a little bit like a movie, but I think there's been several pivotal moments, right? I think we really, like I said before, in the early days, the first couple of years, we were really just trying to understand the business. The founders actually came at Pixelz, like we created the business by scratching our own itch, right? So we come from e-commerce agency background, and the founders actually found that if they would mock up an e-commerce website, with the shop design and put in beautiful imagery, they could go sell a website. They had like a 90% conversion rate, right? It was like, that was their secret sauce into how to like actually grow this agency. But what would happen, right, is like they were super successful selling these sites. But then when people would plug the site into a PIM, or actually start putting new content in, they would get like some pushback, like, hey, this does not look like the mock-ups we saw. And most of the reason was just they did not have quality imagery. The imagery that they were using for markups, it was optimized, it looked great. It was really like they spent a lot of time on it. But when the brands came in and took over content production, it was a whole other game. So yeah, that's kind of the first step into the content production world. The original founders, they tried everything out there, from staffing in-house teams to freelancers to outsourcing, and there was really no scalable solution out there in the market. So hence, hey, we gotta do something about this, right?
This is actually how we kicked off the entire Squaretalk podcast with this topic specifically when we sat down with Alex, right? We talked about the itches, the problems, and sort of when they're something that you experience personally, you're more likely to succeed and actually provide a really good solution because you feel the pain, right? Yeah. So it's really cool that came out of, essentially having a really strong edge.
Yeah. Even for me, I was coming from the fashion industry and I was looking for a way to evolve, and I kind of had my entrepreneur hat on and I was actually trying to create my own secondhand peer-to-peer marketplace back in 2011. So like a ThreadUp or a Tradesy. And my big idea, right, was using an iPhone or using a smartphone to be able to automatically remove the background from a product image and actually populate like a more polished marketplace than an eBay, for example, right? There really weren't many options there. And so, yeah, that for me as well, like the moment I saw this image editing service with an API, it's like, hey, there's going to be a big future here, right? Especially when you get into the scaling piece of it. So,
I mean, the company has a European origin, right? But do you sort of act as a bridge between the Europe and the US right now for the company?
The original founders are Danish. We actually still have our global headquarters is in Copenhagen in Denmark. But yeah, we have a very global footprint these days. So yes, I mean, I have a global team. We have an office in San Diego, which is where we have our North American footprint, but we also have a huge presence in Asia as well. We run a couple of different offices, primarily in Vietnam, and then we have satellite offices as well for our customer success teams. So yeah, very, very global business in nature these days.
And the reason I'm asking is because something you mentioned earlier, and actually we've touched base with this specific topic when we just had our introduction meeting, right? The online one. And so what is the key difference right now that you see between the content production in the US, right, and in EU? And something that we talked about is the role of sort of Amazon and Etsy and eBay, what role they played in, creating that marketplace sort of like vibe, I guess, or like the amount of very catered, very bespoke kind of content that EU creates right now because they never had that.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe you could say it was almost like a marketplace first mentality. There are actually thousands of, e-commerce businesses. It's like, hey, Amazon's their main channel, or, they latch on to an Etsy, for example, right? And, of course, in terms of content production, Amazon, Etsy, right? Most marketplaces have, specialized content requirements. And so, yeah, that either complicates it or it simplifies it significantly in terms of Amazon. Hey, white background, whatever the resolution requirements are for the specific category, things like that. So, but it's hard to generalize because, we see brands of all shapes and sizes. Again, like our company has a global footprint, but we're actually servicing brands around the world. And so, we see a lot of differences between how brands are thinking about content production, how agile they are, what kind of mentality they have. Is it the established retailer? We've always been done like this. 5 layers of art direction and different, rounds of imagery, or if it's like, hey, agile entrepreneur, we're going to go for, 1 hour shot to site and go for extreme agility. So we really do see it all. So a little bit hard to generalize in that sense.
And speaking of actually companies that are agile and processes that are agile, I know that there's been like a large shift in content production in terms of moving from batches to flow, and then your company is among the largest ambassadors of this process. Can you sort of elaborate on how does this work and what are some of the benefits of going into flow?
Yeah. Well, all of this, it really goes back to, again, our Danish founders and, really kind of like the core of I guess our methodology at Pixelz of how we think about production. I think we started as like a traditional outsourcing company. And after we scaled to a certain point, we just realized there's this extreme amount of inefficiencies. And so from a pretty early, probably 5-6 years ago, we adopted a lean production approach, and so, a lot of that of reducing, basically work in progress, trying to really like optimize every part of the production along the way. That's been like a really integral part of everything that we're doing at Pixelz. It also enables us to, deliver extremely fast and also be very competitive when it comes to price. But yeah, what we've seen after talking to, hundreds, if not thousands of studio directors and photographers these days, right, is what we typically see, a studio is shooting throughout the day. Maybe at the end of the day after a shoot, they're going to start, making some selects, and then they have a batch of images ready to go and to be sent off to post-production or sent over to the internal team to do that. We started working with a lot of some of the largest fashion retailers, both in North America and also in Europe, that really wanted to change the mindset and why do we need to, just started questioning the entire process of running in batch, especially when time to market is a huge competitive advantage. It's just ourselves, but also I'm not going to say this is our idea. We've been working hand in hand with some of the largest retailers that have really been pushing the limits on this. So, hey, why do we need to wait 24 hours to send us to post production when I can make the selects on site, on the set, right? And actually then push those over to post. Just things like that, questioning established processes has always been done like that. So the founders of Pixelz, they actually also founded another photo studio management software solution called creativeforce.io. And that was actually, just really part of being really deep in the industry and talking to a lot of professionals over the years. And so one of the things that we saw, and one of the things they've created was actually, while you're shooting, let's make a very simple way to make those selects on set and then instantly get those into the hands of post-production to enable this very quick turn kind of flow production. So yeah, that's been in the works for many years now, and we're actually seeing some of the benefits of it as that's being rolled out. And now we're seeing a lot of clients globally, that are choosing Creativeforce for their photo studio management software and then using Pixelz for post. And there's some pretty awesome case studies out there. I think the bestseller group, which I think they have, 10 plus brands now these days. I think they saw something like an 80% improvement in time to market within a month of transitioning over to using Flow. So pretty drastic improvements can be had by kind of making that shift.
And I know that Zalando is one of your, bigger clients, huge company, huge giant, 8 billion revenue. And so I have a question regarding the approach. So Zalando specifically, their product isn't images, it's their goods. The images is sort of the way to sell the goods. Is there a difference in approach when you're working with, for example, studios, where their product is actually good photos, right? That they're then later on provide to their clients?
No, I mean, in terms of the actual end result, right? If the end result that we are going to help provide is going to be a retouched image, right? That is going to be the same for a brand or a studio. I think the service component around that does change. The relationships obviously change. Helping studios quote things out quickly, basically providing them with the ability to meet deadlines, rain or shine, right? I mean, that's sacred, right? We become an integrated part of a studio's offering, whether Pixelz is front and center or behind the scenes, because we do have studios that white label us. We have others that say, hey, we proudly use Pixelz. But yeah, I think just in terms of our internal relationship, how we think about customer success with studios and brands, there's definitely differences there. I think obviously like for the big high volume global studios that are working with tens, if not hundreds of brands, right? Trying to onboard different style guides and specifications. It's much more intensive workflow, and requires a lot more direct communication. So I think that would be the major difference with a brand. It's, hey, we're going to get them set up, and hey, this season we have a consistent look and feel across most of the categories, and we're probably not going to be making that many changes. With studios, I think it's almost a daily communication. Could be less depending on how many clients they're trying to onboard or work with, right? But we're working behind the scenes in order to help them basically set up what we call specifications in our system to edit and retouch kind of the images for their customers at scale.
And so I actually want to follow up on that. You mentioned consistency, right? What instruments do you have in place to actually maintain consistency when, the processes are scaling, the amount of brands are scaling?
Yeah, good question. I mean, again, maybe going back a little bit to origin stories, right? I mean, we're very technical at the core of Pixelz. We come from a developer or kind of a tech background first. So I think most of the retouchers, if you see kind of the systems, the production systems that we have, and the way that we're actually thinking about posts, is radically different than really everything else out there in the market. So what we have done, again, like by shifting to this lean or agile approach, when we actually receive a style guide from a customer, what we're doing behind the scenes is that we will take that style guide and we're going to break it down into its component steps. Okay. So if we talk about like on model photography, maybe there's going to be, 10 to 15 different retouching steps that need to be performed in order to actually deliver a finished image. And so then what we do is we can have anywhere from, let's say, 5 to 10 different expert retouchers working on that image. And then we're also, depending on these different steps that I mentioned, we're also leveraging automation and technology to basically automate these steps along the way. And so how we think about QA and consistency is like, one, if you don't have a system, and you don't have process, I mean, that is by far step number one. I think we work in an industry where everyone is promised speed and consistency and scale. And we probably get just as many spammed emails as you guys do from outsourced providers. And I think what we tell our customers as well, I mean, this is also going back to consistency, right? When we run a pilot, I don't have my A team standing by that's going to do this amazing job on 10 images. Like the test is at 10,000 images consistent, and do that in the right way. And so we rely on technology very heavily in order to do that. And so like with our system that I was mentioning, when we do break down the retouching process into steps, we don't have one final QA process. Okay. We actually are going to QA an image after every single retouching step or optimization step along the way. It could be an automated step. It could be a manual QA step. Okay. And that has enabled us. It sounds like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work, or how could you guys deliver so fast by maybe a traditional outsourcing company would have one QA step. We could have 30, right? So it sounds like we're, making a bloated system, but it actually enables us to flag issues very early on, again, following a lean methodology. So we're not waiting to the end to flag something. It's like, hey, if the mask isn't, like, let's say we start at masking, if the mask's not perfect, it doesn't move on. If the shadow is not perfect, it's not moving on, right? So we try to address issues up front so that and then solve them. So when we get into bulk production, we can very easily deliver a very consistent result at scale.
And speaking of automation, there's this McKinsey report that talks about change that retail has to undergo to keep up essentially with e-commerce and the changing world. And I'll make sure to link to this paper as well in the show notes. And so the research showed that 52% of retail activities can be actually automated. So I pass the question on to you: which parts of retouching processes have been automated across the last 5 years, and which ones are yet to be?
Yeah. We have seen a tremendous amount of activity here. I think we have our own internal R&D team. We have our own retouching AI that we're leveraging. And, I think at the core, like really the masking piece is, there's huge time savings to be had there. But our teams are working on a lot of different things. And again, because we break down our retouching process into small component steps, at any given time, we're working on automating a lot of these kind of micro steps along the way. So things like, keeping a natural shadow, resizing, cropping, basic skin work. Really, there's a lot of stuff that we can do. I think subjectivity, when clients are requiring much more subjectivity, let's say more artwork required, it's where technology is still, let's say, struggling to keep up. And we don't try to replace, I think we're actually very proud to be running a hybrid post-production model where, hey, masking, clipping, I think you'll struggle to find a retoucher that loves doing that work. And if we can automate that, we're making everyone happy. And what we're doing then is we're training our own internal retouchers to become best in class at what they do, right? To be able to deliver editorial, beautiful work, right? To really, so that we can deliver an amazing finished result to our customers. So it's something, we're always trying to find ways to do that. And then obviously training and helping our own internal retouchers evolve so they can actually produce even more value-added work for our customers.
So the current line is sort of drawn where there's less subjectivity involved, and how much of subjective versus very objective, like catalog images for essentially like Amazon, of clients and content do you have right now?
Yeah, so we've been extremely focused over the years, and we've really specialized in e-commerce PDP product imagery, right? That's where we have developed the most tech. And that's really where we feel like we have a phenomenal service in the market. That being said, we are listening to our customers, and we've seen, I think one of the main changes we've seen in the last couple of years, definitely a move towards more elevated PDP content, even with COVID, and where studios were shut down, we saw a lot of our customers actually shifting just to, hey, we're going to do all lifestyle or all kind of, lifestyle imagery on PDP. Let's try it. And actually we're quite successful with that. So we've definitely been, moving into helping them produce more elevated PDP. Excuse me. We're also seeing a lot more autonomy in the studios, photographers being empowered to try new things, right? Moving away from just, hey, standard white, background removal is a commodity. Ironically, our company used to be called removethebackground.com, right? So I'm very happy we decided to scrap that name, 5 or 6 years ago. And so it is, I think that nuanced work is extremely important. And I think every time more, as everyone is rushing to create a brand experience online, I think creative directors, art directors, photographers, they're looking for ways to position themselves in a unique way, right? I think just getting something decent online is not enough. And so we're trying to accompany our customers on that journey. And actually, just last month, as part of our Flow event in Berlin, we did announce that we're rolling out a much more art-directed version of the Pixelz product, right? So it's really about how do you leverage the Pixelz platform, a lot of the efficiencies and cost savings of the e-com work we do, and how do we bring that into the editorial sphere? So
how drastic? How drastic would be the change, the difference in turnaround time between the less elevated PDP versus the editorial and lifestyle kind of imagery?
Yeah, it's going to be, right now we're working with several of our existing e-com customers actually to develop that out. That's what we're super excited about. We've actually been been dragged into this process, but it's an amazing that we get to work hand in hand with some of the largest retailers in the world in order to roll this out. And what I can tell you right now is that, and you're not going to like this answer, but it's definitely the approach varies. And that's just because the methodology of how editorial is handled between brands can vary drastically. We can have, imagine you can have 5 stakeholders or you can have 50. Right. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen depending on where those images are going to be used. I think for e-com, it's much more streamlined workflow. But again, what we're seeing is, I can give you one use case of a very large New York-based brand where they typically would have like 5 different rounds of retouching in order to prep some of their editorial work. They're leveraging our system to go, let's say round 1, 2, 3. Pixelz is doing a first pass and nailing that. Then we have some art directed. Basically, we're getting feedback, markups, things like that, and doing a second and third round before it's finally approved. And there could, we're also again working in very much a hybrid fashion where we are not pretending to do everything. I mean, our customers have amazing in-house retouching teams, and they're also leveraging those professionals to take their images, really to have that subjective, that branded touch to take those last mile. So we see this as very much a partnership where we are going to be creating different types of workflows depending on the needs of each of our editorial customers. Some of that could be, business as usual, like, could be, hey, just let's get into doing some advanced masking and help out on that front. It could be, hey, we're going to get you to 90% of the way there, and then your in-house team is going to do it. And we are also working with other customers to say, hey, we want you guys to go all the way, right? And excuse me, and in that sense, we're doing some things on the back end on our side, especially on the service side, where we're actually hiring brand ambassadors to come in that will actually own like the aesthetic QA process on our side to make sure that we're delivering things that are 100% in line with what our customers are looking for.
I mean, you earlier mentioned that I'm not going to like the answer, but I really do. And that's something that we have experienced personally as well, the varying approach when it comes to working with a lot of subjectivity. So, and I almost feel like because the flow allows for a shorter feedback loop, right? You're more likely to sort of isolate those problems that might happen, or like the issues that might happen with the subjectivity part, right? And actually like choose the proper path for that. And so at Squareshot, we often think about the agility of process that you mentioned before, and we look at it through the lens of whether we can support exponential client growth or not. And so in your mind, what are some of the prerequisites of, being able to scale overnight, essentially, if that ever occurs to you?
Yeah. That has been a question that we have been thinking about for years, probably 10 years, and it's still something that we think about all the time. One of the things that we have been doing that has radically improved our ability to scale is really investing in technology. Again, and that's the easy answer, right? Going back to that. But just to give you some context, if we go back 3 years or so, we were automating close to 25% of our total post-production work. You fast forward today, and we're at about 75% of what we're doing globally is actually being automated in some shape or form. That could be our own AI, could be with scripts, it could be with actions, it could be with we're leveraging a lot of different ways to make things go faster. And so technology is definitely a huge piece there. And I think there's multiple ways to answer that. I think also one of the things that we went through a process of evaluating our customer base and also really just aligning on expectations, right? Around what SLAs are, like daily capacities, how we're handling customer forecasts, things like that. That's really allowed us to optimize our entire production system and workflow. So, when we do have customers that have one-off peaks, we have, everything is standardized in how we handle that. Like, hey, according to a daily SLA, we're going to deliver 500 images a day. If it's beyond that, 95% of the time, we're actually going to deliver same day. But if we need to deliver it the next day, like, hey, we have an out to do that, right? And it's actually agreed upon by our customers. Like, it's a fair thing, right? That being said, as long as our customers give us a couple days notice, we have a tremendous capacity these days. I think it's also the early days, right, when we only had the capacity to produce a couple thousand images a day, very different than where we are today, where, we can get upwards of almost 100,000 images a day or something like that, right? And so the ability to absorb some customer peaks and troughs becomes significantly easier. So we've got a lot of different things working in our favor these days.
I mean, and these occur not necessarily because something happened in terms of less scale. Take a look at the when LA ports, right, had issues and a lot of shipments from Asia have been delayed. That also creates a huge surge of orders that are almost they're very hard to sort of support if your processes are not tuned out for that.
Yeah, I totally. I mean, we're still seeing that. That's not like and we've been seeing that now for close to 2 years. Just this lack of visibility in terms of forecasts and things like that is extremely difficult, right, for studio managers. I think the way we talk about it internally is that our customers, like studio managers, like they are in an underdog scenario. Like it's difficult for these guys to win, right? It's like, hey, if it's not the product arriving on time, then it's like the samples aren't right. Right? Or it's the marketing team coming and like throwing some urgent job at them, right? There's always a burning bridge. So we've really tried to create process and a system that enables photo studio directors to basically consistently beat deadlines, rain or shine. And, by leveraging reliable, photo editing AI that we have at Pixelz.com. But it's extremely difficult task for these guys. And even if you say, hey, we're going to invest in an in-house team, you mentioned, and we work with a ton of brands, like I said, that do, but they still have the same production issues. If you have product backlogged or sitting on a boat in Long Beach and you got, an in-house team of 50 people without anything to do, it's like, okay, and then all of a sudden you get 10 times the amount of product. And then you got to start finding freelancers or looking for a quick outsourcing solution. Then, okay, what are we going to sacrifice? We're going to sacrifice cost. Are we going to sacrifice quality? Right? It's like something has to give. So, and it's difficult, especially in fashion, right? Where fashion in itself is very cyclical and very unpredictable. I know that very well from working with a fast fashion brand for almost 8 years. Very difficult, right? Just to have a steady, smooth flow. And then you add on these, supply chain uncertainty, and it's definitely a perfect storm for a lot of our customers. Difficult times.
And you mentioned one of the bigger reasons, but what are some of the other ones why should a company choose an outsourced retouching team over an in-house one?
I think that the obvious ones are just that, like the flexibility and the scale, right? So, hey, I don't need to go hire, 50 people to get this done, or hey, we're gonna redo all of the images on our website, right? We want to put everything on whatever. We have a huge backlog and we're gonna plow through something. That sounds great at the surface level. I think depending on the partner you choose, that can turn into either a success story or like a nightmare, to be very honest, right? So again, it's about, what is behind the scenes, how is that team structured, and really, making sure that you understand who's going to be doing that work. But then, flip side, in-house team is total control. You have professional retouchers that understand your aesthetic, right? I think it can be quick turn, but you can also have tremendous bottlenecks internally, right? The team can only do so much. And so, in the US, there's a huge culture of having kind of freelance retouchers on call, in LA and New York, right, to help out with overflow. Which I think it's an okay solution, but is it that the ideal solution for a brand?
Also very costly sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
But is there like an issue that occurs where there's a disbalance between quantity and quality when your business is scaling and essentially you're no longer able to provide as much resource for the quality to be, there?
I think there'll be a lot of everyone will probably have their own answers for that. Like, especially if you ask an in-house team with in-house retouchers, I think it goes, yes, like, hey, if you're doing the same aesthetic day in, day out for 10 years, you can have a well-oiled machine, right? That's just producing beautiful imagery. The question comes, right, like when you start scaling up and down, and you have to work with all the staffing issues. But for us, I think quality is really, is it consistency? And that's how we think about quality. Are we able to deliver a consistent result? And in my opinion, I don't believe that outsourcing equals lower quality. I think that is, but that being said, 95% of our customers have probably been burned by working with an outsourced vendor, right? Or have had some kind of horrible experience. So that's what we're working up against. But I mean, in our case, without talking too much about Pixelz, but I mean, we power some of the largest luxury brands globally and are doing everything on their website, right? So I think it really just depends about what you're looking for. And I think that I actually think a hybrid approach. So, I've talked about us leveraging technology and retouchers in order to deliver a finished product, but even a hybrid approach when it comes to how a brand thinks about staffing their own in-house retouchers and leveraging a partner like Pixelz, because I think there's a tremendous amount of value as well to have retouchers in-house for quick turn jobs, even for overseeing the entire process of externalizing some portions of post-production, whether that's PDP or editorial, right? Having someone that knows 100%. And, yes, if you reject something in our platform, we'll deliver it back within a couple hours, right? But if you have an in-house retoucher that can, hey, it's 2 seconds, right, to do this. I'm going to fix it and it's going to go online, or I'm going to make a one tweak, subjective tweak. Let's get it done. That also gives a tremendous amount of flexibility to a brand, right? So I think trying to find the optimal way to create your own hybrid production model, I think is a very smart thing to do, and we've seen a lot of leading brands these days that have been leveraging that.
And this kind of comes back to, being agile in terms of your approach. And I can draw parallels with, for example, a client we have in Cork School, right? We've been working on them for a really long time. And for example, all of their editorial or like advertising shots, they do themselves in their studio. So they do have an in-house studio that actually does all the job. But all the catalog, essentially, PDP in terms of like the things that go into their website, for example, they use for other retailers, resellers and everything, they use, for example, Squareshot. So there's this kind of approach where they leverage what they're really good at, which is the very, very creative part, the very subjective part where your feedback loop, you have to be present there across the entire shoot, right? And then they use something else to, deliver something more straightforward, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, go ahead.
No. We've seen, that process can be sliced and diced a lot of different ways, like kind of depending on how each brand is structured and how they think about, art and creative direction, right? So.
And so I'm also very curious about this. I don't want to say it's a new trend, but if you were to take a look at sort of brick and mortar companies such as Amazon, maybe Walmart, there's a tendency that they are currently investing into reskilling their talent. They're investing a lot of money into sort of, upskilling their talent, actually. Yeah. I know that Walmart invested over $4 billion, that Amazon invested over $700 million. What is your approach so your retouching team is a resource, is one of the greatest probably resources that you have other than technology. What is your approach towards sort of investing in that talent and upskilling it?
Yeah. Great question. And it's something that's also kind of a foundational thing at Pixelz. So very early on, and we talked about, hey, there is a lot of automation going on. Let's go back 5 years, and we had a lot of people doing basic masking work, background removal, adding a shadow. A lot of that work is being done by bots, right? By computers these days. And so what we actually create, I think, besides the automation piece, we also work with a lot of high-end luxury brands that have very specific requirements, right? That would require that we don't have the skill set to actually take this on, right? Like we would need to go train a team of people to be able to handle certain retouching tasks. So that's always happening, right? Even just by us, the nature of our business is like, hey, we're in a creative industry, so we have to be able to adapt. So one of the things that we did, we actually built out what's called Pixelz Academy about 6 or 7 years ago. And that has really morphed into a pretty amazing, it's an internal tool. So it's not available outside of Pixelz, but we have a staff of about 15 people running the academy. And we have something like 1,200 videos that is teaching anything and everything around content production, right? Around retouching, image editing, optimization, and now editorial work, things like that. And what we have done is we've actually built a gamified system. So, we can bring in a junior retoucher and train them on some basic steps. And then, basically, like, if we don't have work for them to do with that kind of whatever they're capable of doing, we'll actually feed them, videos, and we'll start training them proactively to up their skills, right? And of course, they have incentives on that, and they can earn more the more value they're adding to the company and to our customers. So yeah, and that's been running now for many years. So that's a very integral part of how we think about production and actually how we think about upping the skills, right? Even like the move upstream towards more value-added content. That's extremely important for our business, right? And I think also we used to see, if we go back in time 3 or 4 years, like maybe it would take us 3 months to onboard a new customer, especially if there was custom requirements. I think now we just onboarded one of the largest footwear brands globally, and I think we have them up to producing around 5,000 images a day, and we had them at full ramp within 2 weeks. Okay, so like radical change. So going from like a 3 to 6 month onboarding to 2 weeks, and really having teams available to produce at scale for these guys.
Well, so I'd like to also dig into that a little bit deeper. So what has allowed for such radical change in terms of the amount of time that it took to onboard them specifically?
Yeah.
Just very curious.
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot of changes, but I think one of the main changes that we do, it comes down to how we interact with our customers during like the pilot or the test stage. So I did mention, if someone approaches Pixelz and says, hey, we're looking for a retouching partner, we always will run a free pilot for them. So, we'll ask for image assets in order to set up a test. But what we do not do is we do not use that A team, like I mentioned before. Like, we're not just going to send these off to our best retouchers and then show something that we're not going to be able to do at scale. So one of the major changes that we've done is that we will invest the time to actually set up the specifications in our system. So that SAW system that I mentioned, where we're breaking down the retouching specs, that will get set up in our system, and we will process whatever the batch is, if 10 or whatever, 10, 20, 100 images, we'll process that as if we were doing it in production. And then internally, before we deliver those out, we will make modifications to our system, to the specifications. And maybe we'll have to do, 1 or 2 rounds internally before we feel like, hey, we have the specs set up, and now we're able to show what the result is looking like to our customers. That change in itself has been massive for us. So basically what that means is, if a customer they give us a green light on quality, at that point, we're probably looking at another week before we can go live with bulk production. So it's almost instantaneous, because everything is built into a system. The actual retouching requirements, it's all in the system. And then, we're even doing load balancing and things like that with the skills required from our retouchers in order to ramp up quickly. So yeah, it's been on the, I've spent a lot of my time on the commercial side of the business, and that's been a game changer for us, right? It's so nice to be able to do that. And you'd also see, a lot of our competitors, in traditional outsourcing companies, will take anywhere from, they'll have to staff up a team in India or Bangladesh or something like that, right? And and then if those style requirements change, you got to go through that multiple month training process again, right? It's very slow, kind of clunky. So yeah, it's been a very refreshing change that we've made on our end. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's our customers that are really getting a lot of value from that.
I feel like being process oriented currently feels like the way to go. That's something that has shown immense sort of positive feedback that we got, for example, for, introducing some of these changes to actually making it simpler, making these pre-established guidelines and everything. And I feel like it is already fair to say that e-commerce is no longer the secondary channel. It almost feels like it is, if not the primary one, just absolutely essential. How do you feel our content industry will sort of shift or evolve within the next 5 to 10 years? Do you have any predictions to make?
I don't like making predictions here, Philip. No, but I mean, I think, like you said, right? I think e-commerce is going nowhere. I think the industry has only been accelerated in the last couple of years. That there's everybody knows that. I think what we're excited about is really just seeing brands really, I think, trying to push and innovate. I think like we talked about before. Allowing their creatives to have more autonomy, really to try to create unique brand experiences. I think that's what it all comes down to, right? Of course, we're going back to brick and mortar. I think brick and mortar plays a huge role in retail. But, for the customers that are now accustomed to, let's say, a pure online experience, like they're looking for something unique. They want to be able to interact with the product, whether that's a 3D model, or they need a spin, or they want to have multiple angles, whatever, right? And so I don't see like the investment in content going anywhere but up. I think every time more content is everything, and you see that with just how predominant all of the social channels are, and how brands are really just. I mean, that is the acquisition channel, right? For most of the DTC brands, it's like everything is content driven. So, but where will we be in 10 years? It's a very good question. I think we'll still be knees deep in a lot of content, Philip.
Well, this has been an incredible talk. I appreciate you and I appreciate your insights. I really had a good time. So thank you so much, Brian, for coming on. I'll make sure to link everything that we talked about in our show notes. And thank you so much for coming again.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks.